What's up, guys? So I got a book list for myself that I need to read, and I figure what better to keep my accountability than to read it with other people. So first book we starting with today, diving into a little bit of the esoteric, occultism, mysticism, new thought, whatever you want to call it. Starting off with Kybalion, Hermetic philosophy. This is by the three initiates, and I'll just read the back. The most popular occult work of the 20th century, now in a hardbound edition that evokes the original volume with the new introduction by scholar of mysticism Richard Smalley. It's a vegan leather-bound book, so you know what I'm saying. Just to throw that out there. So I'm gonna preface y'all with there's two introductions, and then the first chapter is like another intro on the Hermetic philosophy. So it might it's a little bit of stuff. I got Dookie out here and I got Pluto out here, but he's off to the side. So start with the introduction. Introduction to the Centenary Edition by Richard Smalley. People grazing in metaphysical bookshops. Wait, I don't know if that's too loud. I might what I might do too is use earbuds to get better audio, but I'll just see. I'll test this one first. People grazing in metaphysical bookshops may have wondered about the mysterious volume called the Kybalion, written by three initiates and first issued by the Yogi Publication Society of Chicago in 1908. The best-known edition is a plain volume bound in blue cloth, stamped with gold, in a format like those of other books from the same publisher, including various works on yoga by one Swami Ramasharaka. Hope I'm saying that right. The Kybalion claims to be a brief introduction into a mystical tradition that has survived from antiquity. The core of the work is a series of aphorisms which the authors contend go back to the early days and were passed on. And were passed on from teacher to student. The exact signification and meaning of the terms haven't been lost for centuries. The word Kybalion, taken at face value, looks vaguely Greek, but it has no meaning in that language. The closest word to it in the standard Greek lexicon, curiously, is Kybalion, meaning dice game. It is also tempting to connect this word with the Jewish mystical tradition known as Kabbalah, especially given that early modern occult texts, such as the 17th century, come here, this way, all right, stay right, sit, Dookie, sit down, can you sit? You can't go over there. Kabbalah, given that the early modern occult texts such as the 17th century English translation of Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy sometimes use a Hebrew word for Kabbalah, Kabbalist, Mekubalim, but the Kabbalah is never mentioned in the Kybalion. Rather, it presents itself as the essence of the teaching of Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, a legendary semi-divine figure who is said to have brought learning to Egypt in the remotest past. Hermes is often identified both with the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth or Tehuti, or Jehudi. The Kybalion is organized according to 7 basic principles, which it says form the basis of occult philosophy. Number 1, mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. Number 2, correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. Number 3, vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Number 4, polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Number 5, rhythm. Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. Number 6, cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Number 7, gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. Stay over here. The origins of this book have mystified many. Scholar Philip de Slip argues convincingly, I believe, that it was written by William Walker Atkinson, who operated the Yogi Publication Society in Chicago. He is also thought to be Swami Ramasharaka. Doogie, stay over here. Rami Sharaka. As the first principle, mentalism suggests the ideas of the Kybalion bear some resemblance to New Thought, a movement to which Atkinson was closely connected. The universe, the Kybalion tells us, is contained in the mind of the All. The All creates the universe mentally in a matter akin to a process whereby man creates the mental images. This idea is central to practically all New Thought teachings. Nevertheless, the book does echo a more remote past. The term the All, for example, resembles the Greek tupan, which means the All, and which appears in some Hermetic maxims, most famously, hin tupan, all is one. Given the claims made for it, the most obvious source to examine for the roots of the Kybalion is the Corpus Hermeticum, or Hermetic body of texts. These were composed probably in the early centuries and purport to expound the wisdom of Egypt as narrated in a series of discourses and dialogues, including Hermes and his son Tet, a version of Thoth. And indeed, there are intriguing resemblances between these works and the Kybalion. The first text in the Corpus Hermeticum, the Poimandres, probably a Greek adaptation of the Egyptian Pi'imneri, or mind of authority, tells us that the source of the universe was nous, consciousness or mind, much as the Kybalion asserts the principle of mentalism. Moreover, this divine mind is described as being androgyne, and existing as light and life, which parallels the concept of gender as set out in the Kybalion. The Kybalion also speaks of the principle of correspondence. This idea appears in other ancient Hermetic texts. The extremely brief and elliptical Emerald Tablet, which says in Latin, Quod es superius est siet quod es inferius ed quod es inferius est siet quod es superius ed perpetranda miracula reunius. Jeez, that was some stuff. What is above is like what is below, and what is below is like what is above, to enact the wonders of one thing. The Emerald Tablet is said to have originally been written in Syriac, a Semitic language spoken in the Eastern Mediterranean world in antiquity, but it survives only in somewhat dissimilar translations in Latin and Arabic. Whether there really was a collection of aphorisms known as the Kybalion and passed down from the master to pupil from the days of antiquity is hard to say. There are, to my knowledge, no copies of it or any references to it that predate the 1908 edition. But that does not mean that there were none, and there are claims of similarly hidden texts in other traditions. The Russian esotericist Boris Mavriov, I'm sorry about these names, guys, claimed that esoteric Christianity has an unpublished set of aphorisms called the Golden Book, some of which he quotes in his 3-volume work Gnosis, Study and Commentaries on the Esoteric Tradition of Eastern Orthodoxy, although these do not resemble the maxims of the Kybalion to any degree. As for the author, William Walker Atkinson, 1862 to 1932, was born in Baltimore, Maryland. After an abortive career as a lawyer, he moved to Chicago with his family in 1900 and lived there for most of the rest of his life. He began writing books and articles in the vein of New Thought, a movement that stresses the power of the mind in creating reality. His first book, Thought Force, was published in 1901. And we might read that one too. Most of Atkinson's books were published pseudonymously. I hope I'm saying that right. In 1903, he began writing under the name Yogi Rama Sharaka, and in 1908, the Kybalion appeared, ascribed to 3 initiates. The publisher was Atkinson's own Chicago-based Yogi Publication Society. The identity of these 3 initiates has long been a puzzle. Many candidates have been named, notably the occultist Paul Foster Case, founder of the society known as Builders of the Adytum, but as Philip Deslip's research has shown, the book almost certainly had a single author, and that was Atkinson. Indeed, in 1917, for a French edition, the translator identified the author as Le Maître Psychiste Américain W.W. Atkinson. You know, hear my little French accent in there. The Kybalion quotes a number of sources from Atkinson's time. Thompson J. Hudson's 1893 work, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, Rama Prasada's 1890 title, the science of breath and philosophy of the Tatwas. What you see, Dookie? Dookie, come here. Duke, come here. Come here. All right, we back. It was just somebody walking on the street. Duke act like she can't be nice to just civilians, man. She tenses up. So I was at the Kybalion quotes a number of sources from Atkinson's time. Thomas J. Hudson's 1893 work, The Law of Psychic Phenomena, Rama Prasada's 1890 title, The Science of Breath and the Philosophy of the Tatwas, as well as philosophers William James and Herbert Spencer. But its chief source probably lay elsewhere. In a 2009 blog posting, tarot scholar Mary K. Greer suggests a plausible source for the Kybalion. In 1885, Anna Kingsford, an Englishwoman who founded an organization called the Hermetic Society, published a book titled The Virgin of the World of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, which contained an adaptation of the Hermetic text. As Greer points out, this book, especially its introduction, written by Kingsford associate Edward Maitland, offers parallels for the Kybalion's 7 principles. Number 1, mentalism. Dude, come here. What are you doing? Come over here, man. Come over here and sit down. Come here. Sit down. You too, Pluto. Get over here. Pluto, come here. Come here. Get over here, man. Number 1, mentalism. Maitland asserts that consciousness is the indispensable condition of existence. Emphasis, Maitland's. Matter itself is merely a mode of consciousness. Number 2, correspondence. Maitland writes, from the oneness of original being comes as a corollary the law of correspondence between all planes or spheres of existence, in virtue of which the macrocosm is as the microcosm, the universal as the individual, the world as man, and man as God. That's deep. Number 3, vibration. The Kybalion formulates this principle thus. Come here. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. This idea echoes a passage in one of the Hermetic texts. There is nothing immutable, nothing stable, nothing unchanging in nature, either in the heavens or earth. Number 4, polarity. Maitland writes, all being modes of the one, no inherent antagonism or essential difference is possible. Total unconsciousness is not being, and bears to consciousness the relation of darkness to light. The latter alone of the two being, however, reduced positive entity, and darkness being non-entity. Number 5, rhythm. The Corpus Hermeticum 14 reads, order maintains the fabric of things established by destiny and necessity. For all this is an everlasting sequence without beginning or end. It rises and falls alternately, and as time rolls onward, that which has disappeared again rises uppermost. Number 6, cause and effect. Maitland refers to the inexorable law of cause and effect and things moral, in virtue of which man's nature and conditions in the future are the result of the tendencies voluntarily encouraged by him in the past and present. And number 7, gender. Maitland writes, so far from repudiating the relations of the sexes, the Hermetic doctrine exalts them as symbolizing the loftiest divine mysteries and enjoins their exercise as a duty, the fulfillment of which, in some of the least of his incarnations, is essential to the full perfectionment and initiation of the individual. Okay, so that's all Maitland's. They're drawing the comparisons to the 1885 work called The Virgin of the World of Hermes, and they're comparing that to this teaching passed down through the Kybalion. And Duke and Pluto ran back there somewhere, so I hope they're straight. Given the resemblances, along with the Kybalion's insistence that it contains the essence of Hermetic teaching, it is very likely that Kingsford and Maitland's work was the main source for the Kybalion. But these examples also show that Atkinson was not plagiarizing the Virgin of the World. Rather, he was attempting to distill its most important principles into his own words. The style and content of the Kybalion echo those of Atkinson's other works. Here, for example, is the Kybalion. And this is a quote. The Hermetic teachings are that not only is everything in constant movement and vibration, but that the differences between the various manifestations of the universal power are due entirely to the varying rate and mode of vibrations. Modern science has proven that all we call matter and energy are but modes of vibratory motion. Wow. Compare this to an excerpt from a booklet entitled Practical Mental Influence and Mental Fascination. Hey, puppy. Good job. Mental Fascination, published under Atkinson's own name. Physical science teaches that the underlying all forms, degrees, and apparent differences, there is to be found a manifestation of some elementary energy which manifests in what is known as vibrations. Everything in the material world is in vibration, ever manifesting a higher degree of motion. Without vibrations, there will be no such thing as a material universe. In fact, physical science itself teaches that not only is a vibration the basic force underlying the forces and the various forms of matter, but also that the apparent differences between the various forms of matter and also the various forms of energy are caused simply and solely by the varying degrees of vibration manifested. You hear that, Doogie? Everything is in motion. You too. Another example. Here's the Kybalion. All the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts and units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. Here's a similar passage from the lessons in Jnana Yoga by Atkinson, written as Yogi Ramacharaka. This indeed is the highest conception of truth in the yogi teachings. This, that all manifestation and emanations of the Absolute are mental creations of the Absolute, thought forms held in the infinite mind, the infinite spirit in them, and they in the infinite spirit. But we are left with this question. Why are the pseudonymous authors said to be 3 initiates? Was Atkinson collaborating with anyone else? If we go by the hypothesis that I have sketched out above, the answer becomes apparent. Atkinson wrote the book by himself. Let me slow down. But he wanted to acknowledge his debt to Kingsford and Maitland. They were the other 2 initiates. He is not saying that they helped to write the book, which they did not do. Both of them had died by the turn of the 20th century. Atkinson is simply paying homage to them by including them in the anonymous trinity of authors. Thus, it is possible to trace out a lineage for the Kybalion, the original Hermetic texts, which have been known in the Western world since the 15th century, which have existed in English versions since at least the 17th, and the digest of these texts as presented by Kingsford and Maitland in Victorian London. In this sense, the aphorisms in the Kybalion are very likely a pious fraud. Certainly their style and mode of thought are more evocative of 20th century America than they are of ancient Egypt or Renaissance Europe. Even so, it would be a mistake, I think, to conclude that this work is so unfaithful to the tradition it lays claims to. A spiritual tradition is based certainly on timeless and unchanging truths, but the application in which these truths are put will vary from age to age in accordance with the age's need. In this sense, the Kybalion is a genuine link in the Hermetic chain. The Kybalion has been a central text for 20th century American occultism and spirituality. This book has been held in Rosicrucian and Hermetic circles and in the realm of New Thought. Florence Scovel Shinn, a popular New Thought author, popular New Thought author of the early 20th century, identified her positive thinking philosophy with the ideas of the Kybalion, and Shinn herself went on to influence probably the best known advocate of positive thinking in the 20th century, Norman Vincent Peale. I'm gonna have to look him up. In the 21st century, the Kybalion's ideas of vibration, frequency, mental alchemy, and the law of attraction were incorporated into Rhonda Byrne's 2006 bestseller, The Secret. Given all this, how do the ideas and the Kybalion relate to the traditional esoteric teaching? The most striking thing about the Kybalion is its terminology: vibration, rhythm, polarity, and causation. All of these point to a scientific or quasi-scientific mode of thought. This fits the book perfectly into its context. The early 20th century, when science had established itself as the ne plus ultra of human knowledge to be taken seriously, thinkers felt the need to frame their ideas in quasi-scientific terms and invoke the hard physical sciences in support of them. We have already seen examples in the passages quoted above on vibration, which cite modern science and physical science as authorities. Our own time has an updated version of this. Metaphysical writers invoke quantum physics and relativity, often garbled in almost unrecognizable forms in much the same way. This practice is legitimate, or at any rate understandable. One naturally wishes to frame ancient and presumably eternal ideas in the terms that will make the most sense to one's contemporaries. But it has created a little known effect. Scientific terms and concepts as framed today characterize the entities they discuss as impersonal and inanimate. They are forces, not living beings. In the 6th century BCE, Thales of Miletus, the first thinker to explore the universe in a way that might be called scientific, insisted that all things are full of gods. No scientist would dare make such a statement today, even if he believed it. Man, my laptop keep freezing up, man. Alright, I gotta go back a couple paragraphs. So, the Kybalion then is a part of a long-range trend in Western esoteric thought to move from a world of the personal, from the spirits, angels, demons, fairies, into the impersonal, vibration, polarity, causation. Some may automatically see this process as an advance or evolution of thought. I myself am not so sure. I do not believe so categorically either in the personal nature or the impersonality of the forces that are being explored here. Rather, I would imagine these forces could look personal viewed from one angle and impersonal from another, the totality being something larger than our minds are likely to apprehend. Hence, there is a major difference between the original Hermetic teachings and the new thought-flavored doctrines of the Kybalion. The Corpus Hermeticum did not exist in a philosophical vacuum. Its highly elevated and abstruse dialogues form only a part of the ancient Hermetic literature. Much of the rest consists of magical texts, and scholars have become increasingly aware that these cannot be so easily divorced in content or inspiration from the more theoretical Hermetic writings. In short, the ancient Hermetists probably did not use a type of new thought like mind power in their practice. Rather, they probably made use of such things as magical rituals, divination, and invocations of the gods, just as we see in the most forms of ancient religion. The use of mind power, as we find it in the New Thought, seems to be very much of innovation of the 19th century, notably of New England healer Phineas P. Quimby and his spiritual descendants, including Mary Baker Eddy, founder of Christian Science. I've listened to Quimby before. I think there's a channel called Timeless Knowledge that has some of his lectures. We now face the biggest and most difficult question of all. What value do the teachings of the Kybalion have? Are they true? There are many testimonials to the effects of thought power on events in the physical world, but then there are also countless cases, many of which we never hear about, in which these ideas simply did not work out or did not work as expected. To speak personally again, I would endorse the basic idea that mind power, indeed, there are levels of mind at which to think something is to make it happen. Nonetheless, the levels of mind that possess this creative power are surrounded by heavy defenses in the psyche. For most people, they are inaccessible. You can force your way through these barricades with certain techniques and certain drugs. This may be what the traditional occult literature calls the confrontation with the dweller on the threshold. This term is used in Edward Bulwer Lytton's classic occult novel, Zanoni. I'm going to have to look that up. 1842. Refers essentially to the psychic barrier between the conscious and unconscious minds. But unless you are extremely well trained and well prepared, and probably even then, this attempt is likely to distort and injure the mind rather than enlightening it. All this as it should be. Do you really want the power to think something and instantly make it happen? Do you have the will and self-mastery that would require? How is that so hard? In any case, I believe that the thought power, in its ultimate form, both offers more power and presents more risk than many people would believe. As for the simpler and easier and less effective forms of thought, thought power, positive suggestion, and so on, I believe they also work, although in less dramatic ways. Certainly, it is better to be saying kind and cheering things to yourself than harmful and destructive ones. But I also believe that there are limits to this practice. The subconscious knows when it's being lied to. As for the Kybalion specific teaching, my own opinion is that they are true, but it is not easy to grasp their essential connection from the terms it presents. Take the idea that the universe is entirely mental in nature. On the surface, this idea appears to be false. On the surface, it seems that there are at least two distinct types of events. Mental events that take place in one's mind. They are not publicly accessible. Not at any rate. What's that, Dookie? Not at any rate. Sorry, I lost my spot. Publicly accessible without some type of communication. We normally distinguish between these and physical events, which are, for the most part, publicly accessible. And if you and I are in the same room and there's a green lamp on the table, we will both see it. But as I have said in my book, The Dice Game of Shiva, How Consciousness Creates the Universe, there is more truth to the idea that mentalism than there may seem to be. We can understand it more clearly if we take the following viewpoint. There is that which experiences and that which is experienced. The former has many names in the world's traditions. The self, Atman, Purusha, the true I, Buddha nature, spirit. It is pure cognition. It has no contents of its own. Then there is that which is experienced. This includes the sum total of all experience, both physical and mental. It is variously known as Prakti, the world, as in the Gospels, and even matter. But it is not matter as conventionally understood. It is simply that which is perceived in all forms. In this sense, a rock is matter, but so is the image of a rock in your mind. Prakti is constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly altering. Hence the Kybalion can tell us, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. In ordinary human consciousness, that which experiences is entangled with that which is experienced. We believe we are what we experience. We believe we are the thoughts and emotions that pass through the mind. We become what we behold. It can be difficult to detach the two, but I believe that this is precisely the goal of many forms of meditation. The self, as a pure witness, watches all phenomena, mental and physical, inner and outer, pleasant and unpleasant, as images passing across the screen of the mind. In this sense, we can say that all is mental. Notice also that the interaction between self and phenomena can itself vary. Self can identify with the contents of its experience, or it can detach itself from them. It seems likely to me that neither of these stances is absolute, and indeed they can alternate, or appear to alternate. Rapidly, in many cases, self identifies with its contents, then it detaches itself from them. Let us go further and posit that this process takes place at all levels of manifestation, from that of the subatomic particle to the atom, to our subatomic particle to the atom, to our own level and beyond. It is, in my view, entirely legitimate to speak of the consciousness of the atom. If we posit that some kind of process whereby this goes on constantly, and shall we say habitually, we now see the source of the vibration that the Kybalion describes, and which, as it points out, is the standard feature of the universe. Because this process takes place at all levels and scales of reality, we also see the source of the correspondence among all levels the Kybalion asserts. In fact, these considerations help explain all the basic principles of the Kybalion. In addition to the ones I have mentioned, we have polarity. This is the polarity between the self and the world, between that which experiences and that which is experienced. Gender, self and the other, which experiences that which is experienced, correspond to the masculine and feminine respectively. Rhythm, the perpetual alternation between identification and attachment between self and other, again at all levels generates the rhythm of the universe. Cause and effect. What we observe as cause and effect is simply the operation and outcome of these processes. In any event, even these few brief points can help us to see the depth and fertility of the ideas of the Kybalion. They also help us see that these ideas are not merely arbitrary string of axioms, but expressions of certain basic principles that once understood illumine them all. Winfield, Illinois, 2016. And then it goes into source list, and then finally, the first introduction. So that was the preface. This is the introduction. This is Richard's introduction. And then there's one more, it's like an intro into the Hermetic philosophy. And I think I'm going to, depending on how long this video is, I'm going to do those in different parts, because even that alone is just good to process that first little bit of info, because I was thinking about skipping past it, but just to meditate on that is good stuff. So, okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to jump into Smalley's introduction.